Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Hate crimes in the U.S. have been on the rise since 2015. Nearly 6 out of every 10 hate crimes were committed because of bias against the victim's race or ethnicity. Half of the incidents were racist actions against African Americans. 1 in 5 victims were targeted because of religious bias, and 1 in 6 because of bias against sexual orientation. Sadly, some of those stats have happened right here in Virginia. Up next on Another View, we talk with the FBI about its Civil Rights Division and what you can do to help fight hate. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. In 2016, the FBI released a report that showed the increase in hate crimes over the year before, 5,800 incidents in 2015, and a sharp increase to 6,100 in 2016. Former FBI Director James Comey is quoted as saying, "Hate crime is different from other crime. They strike at the heart of one's identity. They strike at our sense of self, our sense of belonging. The end result is loss of trust, loss of dignity, and in the worst case, loss of life." Joining us today on Another View to talk about hate crime and what you can do to prevent or help solve a hate crime is Supervisory Senior Resident Agent Theodore Roese, Supervisor of the FBI's Peninsula Resident Agency and the Norfolk Division's Civil Rights Program Manager. That's a mouthful, but welcome, Ted, to Another View.
Thank you, Barbara. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to start our conversation, and I want to get kind of an elephant out of the middle of the room, because as we talk about the African American community, historically, the FBI and the African American community may have had some differences. That's not sugar-coated. So make the case for us why today's FBI is not our grandfather's FBI.
Well, I think that we've come quite a long way from our grandparents' FBI. If you look, for instance, back to the J. Edgar Hoover administration with the FBI, I mean, probably the legacy that unfortunately Mr. Hoover enjoys is the legacy of wiretapping politicians, and that's simply not an observance of people's rights, and we can't operate that way in the United States. And so not only have we come a long way in the sense of having a greater respect and appreciation for what our core mission and our core values are, but we achieve those in a fundamentally different way.
And what's the difference
outreach,
now? Through community outreach?
Through engagement with the people we are bound to serve.
Mm-hmm. So you are determined to really make that connection with the community, which is part of the reason why you're here today.
Yes.
But you head up the Civil Rights Division of the Norfolk office of the FBI. For people who are not familiar, give us a little bit of the hierarchy, if you will, in terms of what you cover, and then what exactly that means in terms of the Civil Rights Program.
The FBI's Civil Rights Program fundamentally includes 3 kinds of investigations. Those are hate crimes, what we call color of law cases. Typically, more often than not, color of law cases translate into police use of force investigations. Mm-hmm. And then the third significant category of civil rights investigations is human trafficking.
And that's a big issue in our area also.
It's part of everybody's dialogue every day today in the United States, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So you run the Civil Rights Office, right, or program for the FBI. What is a typical day for you? Is there a typical day?
Well, as a supervisor, I don't conduct the investigations anymore. Okay. So, but I do I review any intake for cases that have the potential of becoming a civil rights investigation. Mm-hmm. I'm often out speaking with members of the community, just like I am today. Mm-hmm. So this kind of engagement is a part of my everyday experience. in that capacity.
How many people work with you in this division?
This is a very small division. Personnel-wise, this is the Norfolk division is the third smallest FBI division in the United States, and so I have 2 investigators assigned to work civil rights cases.
Is that because we don't have issues here?
It's because we haven't had referrals here, but I could certainly arrange to bolster that resource pool if something significant were to happen here.
So, and we'll talk about that a little bit more a little later. But let's talk about, for our audience, exactly what is a hate crime.
A hate crime at the federal level involves 2 fundamental elements. Threat or use of force is one of those elements, and that threat or use of force must be motivated by some type of bias. Typically, as you mentioned in the opening, the bias is based on racial differences between the subject and the victim, but not always. Sometimes it's based on religion, sometimes it's based on sexual orientation, that kind of thing.
And how do you determine that? Is it just because somebody says, I hate that person because, is it that simple, or is there more to that?
It can be, but it usually is not. And typically, what you see in a lot of hate crime incidents are some kind of symbolic communication.
Such as
burning crosses.
Okay.
Such as swastikas. And then, of course, there are a number of pejorative terms that are commonly used. But in most hate incidents, people don't overtly say why they're committing the violence they are committing. And so you have to sort of read those symbolic communications and determine whether or not there was actually some level of bias involved in the incident.
So there has to be something physical that happens to the victim.
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
It can be a threat.
Oh.
It can be a threat, and for that reason, the investigation of hate crimes often is an exercise in where does the First Amendment right to free speech end?
I was just getting ready to ask that. How do you tell?
When was a threat really issued?
So what do you use to gauge that?
Well, I mean, all of our investigations, whether it's civil rights or otherwise, all of our investigations are conducted hand in hand with the United States Attorney's Office. So ultimately, they are the individuals who make a decision about whether or not the elements of the crime have been satisfied.
So, if something happened to me and someone threatened me or made me feel unsafe in some way and used a racial slur along with that, my first thought would not be to call the FBI. So what has to happen to make that crime rise to your level?
Well, ironically, it's sometimes easier at the federal level to investigate and prosecute a hate crime than it is at the state level. In fact, many states in the United States don't have hate crimes statutes at all. So one of the reasons these cases tend not to get referred to the FBI is because the police go out and investigate a threat or an assault. And the idea that they would be pursuing a hate crime charge doesn't occur to them at all.
So a lot of times it could be a hate crime, but it's not treated that way.
Yes.
So therefore, it never rises up to your level. So how do you work with other law enforcement then to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, it starts with education. And again, it starts with engagement, right? Most local law enforcement officers have no idea, because it wasn't part of their training, what constitutes a federal hate crime. So in order to make sure those referrals are made in the appropriate circumstances, we have to educate our local partners about what that might look like.
Ted, I know people can probably say, all right, if you think about Dylan Roof, as an example, on the national level, and his going into Mother Emanuel Church and shooting those people, that's pretty clear that was a hate crime.
Yes.
But give us some other sense of, from a day-to-day basis as Joe citizen, what could we be seeing and not recognizing that it could potentially be a hate crime?
Well, I think the thing that I'd like to draw everyone's attention to is the beginnings of what becomes hate crimes later on down the road.
Perfect.
And as our community has learned to begin communicating through cell phones instead of face-to-face, what we see, unfortunately, is that our young people are using the anonymity, or at least the anonymity that they perceive in communicating through text messages, to communicate things that they should not be communicating. Things that later on start approaching that border between First Amendment protected free speech and what is a prosecutable threat, either at the state or the federal level.
So they start texting each other, saying things.
Yes.
And it could potentially grow from there. So what are some, can you be a little more specific in terms of what some of those things are? I know we're not trying to spread hate messaging, but at the same time, I think people really need to understand what they're seeing, especially for parents who may be, looking at their kids' phones and so forth.
So, for example, we might get a referral from a school that somebody sent a text message to another student that said, "I'm going to kill you," insert some pejorative term for a group of people. And under the two elements of federal hate crimes, that would achieve both of those things.
Wow.
Right? It's a threat, and it's also, there's a clear bias motivation in that communication. Now, if you're talking about a 14-year-old student, that's not going to be the foundation of a federal hate crime prosecution. But there's an educational process that needs to take place nonetheless.
Well, and that's also a place to keep it from getting to the extreme where it becomes a school shooting.
Yes.
Or whatever. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation today. We're talking with the FBI and with Agent Roese about hate crimes and about what we can do as a community to change them or to help mitigate them or keep them from happening. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So let's take that case that we were just talking about. And so you have this text. The school calls you in. You take a look at it. Suppose it elevates to the next level. What happens from your perspective as the FBI?
Well, we are going to pursue an investigation. Whether or not an investigation results in a prosecution is a totally different matter. That's, for the most part, outside the responsibility range of the FBI. That's the decision, as I mentioned, of the U.S. Attorney's Office.
So your job is just to gather the information.
Yes.
It's to gather the information.
Gather the evidence.
That's not a just. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yes, but to gather the information.
Sure.
Okay.
So we're going to issue subpoenas to the internet service providers of the phones that sent and received those messages. We're going to have conversations with the people who received the message, the people who sent the message, that kind of thing. And then we're going to explore whether or not there's any specific history of bias between those people in the past.
Okay. Wow, our phone lines are lighting up. Are we ready, Lisa, for phone calls? Or okay, Giovanni joins us from Portsmouth. Hi, Giovanni. How are you? Could you turn your radio down, please?
Yes.
Okay, you're on the air.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Giovanni Alexander from Portsmouth. And my comments and concerns are about, I travel often to other cities like Memphis, Tennessee, and I see the civil rights museums and the memorials to Martin Luther King. And I travel to Charleston and other places that have taken the hatred and bigotry that existed and addressed it, created monuments, created institutions of learning, even the one in D.C. And in the 757, we haven't done that. We've swept most of the angst and anguish under the rug. And even though the citizens in the 757, some are 60 and 70 years old, they went through the civil rights struggle. They went through this, and they're still alive, and they're still talking about it. So my question is there, do you think it's feasible from the perspective of the FBI for us to have more education on bias and where we came from and to actually address it? And would that tamp down, you think, on, bias crimes for children?
Giovanni, thank you for that call. That's a great question. You want to go ahead and respond? So he's asking, what can we do in terms of education?
Well, I think that what we're starting to see now is a rewriting of the history books. And I think this is a great time for everybody to sort of regather their resources and re-educate themselves on the whole. We recently had a viewing at my office of the Ava DuVernay documentary, The 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment, of course, but the subsequent history pursuant to the 13th Amendment since then. And this is a time of some really great resources like that and some great opportunities, both online and face-to-face, to increase everybody's understanding of what's really happening out there.
So as we go forward, and when we're talking about the, once you've done your investigation, say you find that there's merit, what's the next step? What happens then?
We're going to exhaustively collect every piece of evidence that we can to support either one way or the other that this incident does or does not meet the standard for the federal hate crime statutes.
So how do we as citizens then, how would, in that instance or any others, how can we help to make it better or to bring these incidents to your attention? What do we need to do?
Well, we work exhaustively with community leaders all over the Hampton Roads area to try to make sure that if there is an incident that is even a borderline case of what might become a hate crime investigation. Now, obviously, the FBI can't do anything about that if the FBI never becomes aware of that. And unfortunately, social media being what it is, normally these cases now today come to us through social media. We pick up on some kind of viral internet video, and the next thing you know, we realize that happened right down the street here.
Wow.
So
you'd rather people pick up the phone and call you or reach out to you?
I would much rather get those referrals either from the victims themselves or through the local police departments, yes.
If you're a victim, what do you expect? What should you expect? You make the call. I call you up. I say, Agent Roese, this is what happened to me. What's going to happen to me?
Well, what I cannot promise you is that there's going to be a full investigation. I can't promise you that there's going to be a prosecution. Those things are not mine to promise. But what I can absolutely guarantee, anybody who feels like their civil rights have been violated, come to me. You're going to have somebody hear your story through an objective lens. You're going to have somebody who understands how hate crimes are prosecuted, listening to your story. That's my guarantee to anybody out there.
And you need people. Who do they call? I mean, in other words, I guess I'm trying to get to, do I call my local police first and then they kick it up to you, or can I call you directly?
You can call us directly. Absolutely. Call the main number for the Norfolk FBI division, okay, or call our public access line.
And we'll take it from there.
Right.
Let's talk to Heather in Virginia Beach. Hi, Heather. You're on the air.
Yes. Yes, Barbara, another superior educational program. Thank you, FBI Roese. I have been a victim of hate crimes. I've been part of Southern Poverty Law for 30 years, and I'm up to date on all the escalation of these hate crimes. And then I myself, because I have a recognizable, this is not racial for me, I'm blonde and blue-eyed with very white skin, but I have a recognizable Muslim last name. And so now we are not only shifting, which is horrible, what has happened with people with brown and black skin and red skin in this country, but now against Muslims. And I could hardly vote. I had voter suppression, and a wonderful African-American gentleman finally came to my aid and made it possible after a very white woman with blonde hair for 20 minutes could not find me in the system and asked me to step aside, and I refused, even though there was a line growing and people were looking at me with a lot of hatred because they also recognized that my name had a Muslim name, a famous one, a well-recognizable one, and that Muslims at that time were being told we are not wanted in in this country. The building that I live in, I walked in, I just happened to put a scarf over my head to keep the wind from getting in my ears, and people in the lobby refused to let me in, calling me a terrorist.
Heather, we and I hear you. I hear that there's concern because it is beyond race in terms of what a hate crime can be.
There's no question it's beyond race. Religion, sexual orientation, absolutely. Hate crimes take several forms.
So let's talk about police use of force also, because that's another area that you cover. If you're in partnership with the police, with local law enforcement, is it more difficult then to investigate if someone accuses an officer of excessive use of force?
I'm sure it's difficult for the community to believe this, but the reality is, no, that doesn't cause an impediment in terms of the investigation of police use of force incidents. Mm-hmm. And the simple fact of the matter, Barbara, is that there's not a police department out there that wants bad cops on their force. That's not good for anybody. Mm-hmm. And so particularly police departments do not want cops on their force who are going to misuse their authority, misuse the force that is provided to them. And so it's often the case in this area that those incidents are referred to the Virginia State Police. So one of the reasons that I think my office hasn't received more of these incidents is because the Virginia State Police is doing a fine job of handling these.
So you guys don't cross jurisdiction. If one agency gets it, then they kind of take it and run with it?
We could, but for all intents and purposes, we're investigating the same facts and circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think one of the areas that where people's trust becomes an issue, yes. and even though I know this is not your direct dealings, but with the FBI overall. So we have a question from Facebook that said, what's the difference between COINTELPRO and Black Identity Extremists? Now, the Black Identity Extremists, that has come out recently as a new group that's been identified, I guess, as people who may want to retaliate against police officers because of police excessive use of force against black men in particular. And I guess the question is, how do we take an organization and a community and put them together so that they can start to understand each other?
Well, for anybody who's interested in pursuing a violent agenda against the police, let me ask you, please, let me beg you, please come have a conversation with me before you do that, right? Because that's not the answer. Whatever the answer is, Barbara, that's not the answer. So let's have the conversation first. Let's make sure the community understands that our lines of communication are wide open before there's a Ferguson here, before there's a Dylan Roof here. Let's make sure those lines of communication are open before the incident takes place.
So one of the other challenges, I guess, that you have as a leader within the FBI and the FBI overall is you struggle with diversity. And I know that we were talking before the show, I was telling you I was looking for photographs of African American agents, with the big FBI on their back that I could use to promote. And it was very, very difficult to find those pictures. What are you all doing to try to change that? Because I would imagine it'd be a little bit easier maybe with your investigations, even if you had people of the communities that you need to investigate.
You call on a really good point, and one of the things that Director Comey did while he was still the director of the FBI was to establish diversity as one of our core values with the FBI. And so we have made huge pushes towards diversifying our workforce, and not just the agent population of the workforce, but every aspect of our ranks. And so we still have a lot of work to go in that regard, but we've made big steps as well. What I don't have a great answer to is the fact that there is still a fundamental distrust on the part of the African American community towards law enforcement in general. Mm-hmm. And so we're in a bit of a circular process where particularly African American young men don't trust law enforcement and aren't interested in pursuing careers in law enforcement.
Yeah, it's kind of hard when your initial orientation is not officer friendly. Because in certain communities that is not the orientation that they receive from law enforcement. So that becomes a challenge, absolutely. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about hate crimes with Agent Theodore Roese, Program Manager of the Norfolk FBI Civil Rights Program and Supervisor of the FBI Satellite Office on the Peninsula. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Mark joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good
Ms.
afternoon.
Lee and good afternoon, Mr. Agent Rose.
Good afternoon.
Hey, good. Agent Rose, a small world. I called a friend of mine, Agent Webster, to let him know that you were on, and he told me that he was actually supposed to be on with you this afternoon.
Yes, he was supposed to be here.
But what I briefly discussed with him before calling in is that the bar for the federal hate crime is like extremely, extremely high in level of proving. I just wanted to know what, for every indictment that you guys bring, what is the conviction rate on hate crimes to date?
Well, our conviction rate is extremely high. Our indictment per incident rate is not high at all. As you pointed out, the threshold, the standard for convicting somebody at the proof beyond a reasonable doubt level is high to begin with, and at the federal level, we take that even to one step up. But
so you can get the conviction if you can get it to the conviction point.
If we get an indictment on somebody, it's something like 99% that we're going to get a conviction. But interestingly, in the area of hate crime investigations, the standard for what constitutes bias in these incidents at the federal level, it just has to be some significant element of bias. In some states, and again, I would reiterate that some states don't have hate crime laws at all, but in some states that do, the bias motivation has to be the sole motivating factor for the violent incident. And so that's a very high standard to achieve, and it's actually easier in those cases to prove a hate crime at the federal level than it is at the state level.
Mark, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate that. So I know that there are a lot of programs that you have, community outreach and so forth, in terms of trying to bring people into the FBI from different communities. First and foremost, you mentioned not all agents. What other opportunities are there within the Bureau? Because I think that's the first thing people think about, is that they would become an agent.
Sure. We have many different administrative responsibilities, but also on the investigative side, we have intelligence analysts, we have folks who do all kinds of media research and subject identification research. We have people who are responsible for making connections between the various data sets that exist with our agency and many other federal and local agencies. So we have many more people in the FBI ranks who are not agents than we have folks who are agents.
So if someone were interested in finding out more information about how to join the ranks of the FBI, where would they go?
FBIjobs.gov is a great starting point. You can certainly contact the Norfolk division and ask to speak to the recruitment coordinator.
Mm-hmm. And are there jobs where are all of the jobs, start over, Barbara, do all of the jobs require you have a degree, or are some of them more technical in nature?
They don't all require a degree, but to become an agent, the minimum qualifications are a bachelor's degree and 3 years of applicable work experience.
So you need to be a law enforcement person?
You don't have to be.
Okay.
I wasn't. We go through phases like any corporation or any other agency where we're recruiting more lawyers, or we're recruiting more accountants, or we're recruiting people with more language skills.
Gotcha. How did you get into the FBI?
You know, it was obviously not my looks that got me in, Barbara. So, well, I waited until after 9/11, and I think I just got lucky in terms of the timing, quite frankly.
So 9/11 was the catalyst for you?
Yes.
Okay, and you were working in a totally different field, correct? So
Totally
it
different.
wasn't law enforcement, but you plan to retire from the FBI?
Yes. Yeah. We're mandatory to retire as agents at 57 years old. So.
Oh, really?
So.
Why is that? They think you can't run through the yards anymore?
That must be it, I guess.
Oh, gosh. Let's talk to Frank in Norfolk. Hi, Frank. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you very much for your very, very important program, first of all.
Thank you.
And specifically this issue about hate crime. This is a country in the United States where there is such a level of antagonism between the races, and it's historically based. But my specific question for your guest is, what is the number of African Americans and Hispanics who are in top positions at the FBI today?
Thank you very much for that call. Do you know?
It's very small, but increasing every day. What the actual percentage is, I'm afraid I have no idea. But I know that 2 of the special agents in charge of the Norfolk Division in the last 15 years were African American.
We actually had both of them on the show. I believe. I know we had one at least, but and that was a big deal because I believe he was the first one to come in.
In fact, we had a temporary special agent in charge here who is now the special agent in charge of the Baltimore Division. Gordon Johnson, I don't know if you ever met him while he was here, but he's an African-American gentleman as well. And, you know, I think one of the unique dynamics of the Hampton Roads area, Barbara, is that with the kind of military presence we have here, there's obviously racism and civil rights history is a very important part of our culture. But it's been my experience, particularly with the military, that folks in the military don't allow racism to prevent them from getting their mission accomplished and from living a good life.
So when you go into a community, particularly an African-American community, and you're trying to talk to them about the FBI and about hate crimes and all of that, do you find that you have to spend a good deal of time kind of convincing them that you're legit first? I mean, I'm trying to get a sense of the dynamics that you face.
It's
when you're
tough.
in the community.
And my friend, as your caller pointed out, my friend James Webster was supposed to be here. He doesn't have to work quite as hard to convince folks that he's legit as I do. But when you start to talk about cases that you've investigated, people's attitudes change very quickly.
Okay. Such as, can you give us an example?
Well, my first hate crime investigation was in the Cleveland division of the FBI. And a couple of local white drunks decided that they didn't want this mixed-race couple living next to them anymore. So they somehow obtained a quantity of mercury and used that to squirt it all over their neighbor's porch.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
So how did that turn out?
Well, it was referred to us, of all things, by the Environmental Protection Agency. And they were both convicted of federal hate crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Donna Marie joins us from Virginia Beach.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Hi, Agent Rose.
Hi.
I want to thank both of you for your clarity, for even approaching this topic. And what I want to share, and I want to reflect very briefly in a humanistic and holistic way on these thoughts. Going back to about 25 minutes ago, what Giovanni had stated, the gentleman from Portsmouth.
Yes.
He really touched on something very pivotal here, education. And I'm going to go further than that as education and communication being key elements in planting the seed for change, awareness. And I want to say next, we as Americans have the greatest Constitution and Bill of Rights ever written in the history of humanity. And we have never lived the principles of either of those pieces of truth. I'm only second generation, but I bear as much responsibility to live the principles of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, and not to divide through differences, but to help bring people together in my family, in my neighborhood, in my community, through a sense of oneness and a living, breathing principle of oneness. We need to start living these principles, Barbara and Agent Roese.
Donna Marie, we agree with you 100%. Thank you so very much for your call. You know when to respond, Agent Roese?
I think those are great comments, and I'm very glad you shared those with us. And what I will ask folks is this. Try to develop an understanding of what this issue is all about, but when you're going to think about whether or not the FBI or local law enforcement is doing their jobs properly, I'd ask you also to consider how much impact we can actually have on this issue. There's a strong facet of this discussion that bears on a socioeconomic issue. We are not legislators. In fact, it's not our position to even comment on what legislation is. We are collectors of evidence and people who attempt to determine whether or not a crime has been committed. And because
I think people, when they're caught up in a situation like that, they look at you and expect you to fix it. And that's not really what your job is.
No, to the contrary, we don't make policy or get involved with what the law is, except as a person who votes. I have no control over what the law is. And especially in an environment where people are starting to talk about, going back as far as the Nixon administration and the war on crime and what has now become recognized as the process of mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex. The fundamental job of a law enforcement officer is to take criminals out of the community. And so we're a little bit at conflict because that process fuels those other processes. That process, the job of a law enforcement officer fuels the mass incarceration process.
Because that's the beginning step.
That's a big that's a conflict for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you want if the African American community in particular, since this is another view, to know about law enforcement in general and then about the FBI specifically?
Well, law enforcement in general, I want the African American community to consider what they don't see. Ask yourself, Barbara, how many encounters between law enforcement of any color and citizens of any color take place across the United States every day?
There's got to be thousands, millions.
Thousands, clearly. Clearly the number is thousands, and a vast majority of those interactions are completely inconsequential. And so nobody ever hears about those. And so we have a little bit of a skewed idea, I think, as a society about how oppressive our law enforcement officers are and how badly our law enforcement officers are or are not behaving. Again, neither I nor any other ranking law enforcement officer that I've worked with wants bad cops in their ranks. They don't. That's not good for any of us. And we are 100% committed to making sure that law enforcement uses their authority to protect the citizens, not to abuse them.
I saw on your website, you have the Teen Youth Academy, you have the Junior Special Agents. These are working with young people. And I wonder, Agent Roese, what do they say to you about their perception of you? What do you hear from the kids? Because that's where the attitude starts.
Yeah, it is, and I'm happy to tell you that I get a lot of, I didn't realize that that's what the FBI did. I didn't realize that the FBI was involved in things like that. And I didn't realize that the FBI was involved in civil rights in this way. a lot of young people have no idea what the FBI's role or even what law enforcement in general's role is in protecting our civil rights.
Tell me about the Countering Violent Extremism program.
Well, ever since 9/11 and even before that, the FBI's priority has been on preventing terrorist attacks and preventing, and now that mission has expanded. We've seen, unfortunately, a sort of wave of these school shootings and things like that, and it's just essential that this dialogue be maintained at a civil level. It's essential that this progress that we're going to make on this front be done in a peaceful manner.
Let's see. We're going to talk to Lawana in Hampton, Virginia. Lawana, we're not going to talk about specific racial slurs. You're not going to say the slur, right?
Oh, no, I'm
okay,
not.
Okay.
I just will say the N-word.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Go ahead and ask your question.
My question is, I had one of my clients to call in to my place of work, refer to me as the N-word and the N-word with the BS attached to it, and talk about my work and my character. So I'm just trying to figure out, is that something that rises to a level of maybe not necessarily threat or the use of force, but is that something that needs to be monitored, or a hate crime, or the potential to be one, or a defamation of my character because of my race, that type of thing?
So Luana is asking a question I think a lot of people want to know is kind of, this happened to me, do I call you or not? Because they also don't want to call you with frivolous things too. So go ahead and respond to her.
So my response to the latter portion of that is absolutely call us. And we'll make a determination of whether or not this is something that fits the federal statute for a hate crime. We'll be happy to hear through whatever concerns you have. Off the top, it doesn't sound like this meets that. As I mentioned before, the federal standard for a hate crime involves two elements, the first of which is threat or use of force. So I didn't hear in this that there was a specific threat issued.
Lamana, does that help you?
Yeah, that helps me. Thank you very much. I appreciate taking my call.
Okay, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate that. As we look at ways, or I'm curious, I guess, about ways that you all are trying to recruit young folks, particularly, to come into the FBI. I mean, where are you going? What is the agency doing in general? Because I know some of the barriers may be, is particularly for communities of color, not just African American, but also Latino and others who may have had some issues in their past, but they may have risen above those issues, but yet that may stop them, as in other law enforcement agencies too. I remember when I worked for Prince George's County Police in Maryland, and you could not have used any type of illegal substance, and that stopped a lot of people from being able, who had gone way past that and had done other things in their lives, but they weren't eligible to even apply. So are there standards or things that are changing to accommodate the workforce that's out there, or you're just kind of keeping it the same?
Well, there are some relaxing processes of what had been the standards. It hasn't been relaxed much, but what we were trying to focus on now is reaching out to a younger and younger audience, and not just for the purposes of recruitment, but to help 12 and 13-year-olds understand that if you live in this part of Newport News or Portsmouth, you're going to be recruited by gang members, right? And if you send these kinds of things using your phone, then you're putting yourself in a position to be targeted by predators.
Wow.
There are many messages that we need to get out to a younger and younger audience, and recruitment is only a part of that message.
So, and kids are able to turn around if you spend the time talking with them.
Yeah, and it's not just for our own recruitment purposes, but for any kind of professional career, right? You get caught with that possession charge, and you've taken yourself right out of contention for all of the best professional positions.
Do you ever get discouraged about trying to bridge that gap, particularly with the Black community?
I get discouraged about it all the time, I'm sorry to say, but it's like, you ever play golf, Barbara?
I haven't, but my husband plays.
Right.
And he comes home and says, I'm a work in progress.
Yeah, but it's that one good shot that he hit in that 18-hole round that takes him back and gets him back out there. And so every time I start to feel a little bit down about what's happening here, something great and inspiring happens and just picks me right back up.
Wow. What about women? Are there a lot of women in the agency period and as well as agents at this point?
We've had a lot of success recruiting some great women to our agency in every kind of position.
So we got about 2 minutes left. I'll give you those 2 minutes to make your case again to the community as to why they need to call you, why we have to be more observant, why we need to let you know what's going on.
All right. Well, we need to know about these incidents. First of all, we can't fix a problem that we're not aware about. But I would also ask people to try to share the vision that I have, that we're moving in the right direction. You know, you look at incidents like Ferguson, you look at incidents like Garrett Garner,
Baltimore, my hometown,
Freddie Gray, for sure. These are tragic incidents, and I don't mean to take away from the tragedy inherent to any of those incidents. Sure. But if you think about it, you know, the folks who are 10 years old in our country right now have never lived at a time when we have not had a black president in our history. If you look at television shows, you can't watch a television show today without seeing an African-American person and people of other ethnic backgrounds in positions of authority on those shows. And every day, young people are bombarded by much, much different media images than you and I probably experienced when we were young people. And so combine that with the fact that every person now has a high-definition recording device in their back pocket, and police across the country know you cannot misbehave today without, and you're not going to get away with that stuff today. Exactly. So the people who would be prone to do that are not becoming police officers now.
All right, we're out of time. Agent Roese, thank you so much
for
joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Essie Patha-Merkerson from Law and Order. You are listening to Another View.
They know that's my absolute favorite of our teasers that's going on. That's my favorite show. According to the Journal of Black Psychology, suicidal thoughts and actions among African Americans receive little attention because of the historical belief that very few blacks experience sadness or depression. Therefore, it was long assumed that blacks rarely attempted, let alone completed, suicide. However, in reality, suicide is the third leading cause of death among African Americans between 15 and 19 years of age, and the fourth leading cause for 20 to 29-year-olds. In part 3 of her series on minorities and mental wellness, producer Lisa Godley looks at the issue of suicide in the African American community.
In the African American community, there is a completed suicide every 4.5 hours, and for every suicide death, there are 11 attempts. While the suicide rate is higher in males, studies show suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts are much higher in women.
I felt lonely. I didn't have answers. I felt clueless, confused.
Whitney Graham says she was so unhappy as a child that all she wanted to do was die.
When I was 15, I went into a very, very dark place to a point where I had to be homeschooled. And I was not eating, not sleeping, not talking, just in my bed for days. I remember eating crackers and ginger ales and like little sandwiches, and it was because my parents forced me to eat, but I didn't want to. I wanted to die.
Whitney's story of depression and suffering that led to thoughts of suicide is not uncommon. According to the National Institute of Health, African American adolescents and young adults have the highest number of suicides, more than any other age group of African Americans. Mitzi Glass is a licensed clinical social worker who gives us an inside look at what we're seeing in the African American community.
In the last 20 years, the suicide rate among African American children is rising. One statistic I found said that it's rising almost 233%. So that is a concern.
She goes on to share important things to look out for if you believe someone you care about is suffering with depression or possibly contemplating suicide.
We're looking at depression, and depression is sadness that doesn't go away. Also, hopelessness. And we know that African Americans experience much more hopelessness, like things are just not going to get better. Running away is another piece that we look at with suicide. But here at the hospital, a lot of times, Lisa, I just ask children, have you had thoughts or have you had a desire to, and I don't say the word hurt or harm, I have to use the word kill. Have you had a desire to kill yourself, or have you ever tried? So if you've actually tried and had those thoughts, then chances are I'm looking at the possibility, the strong possibility, that you may actually try again.
According to a recent Georgia State University study, suicide was rarely, if ever, talked about in the African American community, leaving little room to address stigmas or hold important discussions about treatment. When it is discussed, some experts believe there is a mentality that African Americans should be able to handle anything without struggle. That, coupled with the stigma that any sign of mental illness is a sign of weakness, leaves many in need of help afraid to seek it. Whitney Graham knows firsthand the importance of leaving the stigmas behind and getting the help you need. She says too many lives are at stake.
I'm not crying because of what I went through, because I've healed. I'm crying because there is someone somewhere that is listening who's going through the same thing that I went through. And it's a very hurtful place. And I hope that this message is heard so that they can get help, because a lot of people deal with depression and suicidal thoughts.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And if you or someone you know is contemplating suicide and you need help, call 1-800-273-8255. That's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-8255. Our series on mental wellness and the African American community is in partnership with the Artix Foundation. For more information, please visit artixfoundation.org. Next time on Another View, a deeper dive into the mental health challenges facing the African American community. We will hear from young people who deal with mental illness more frequently than you think. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Janae Jackson answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thank you so very, very much for listening to Another View.